podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
This is London. London calling in the home, overseas and European services.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Achtung Millwall. Broadcasting from beautiful South Bermondsey, it's the #1 Millwall podcast. Accept no substitute.
Hello dear listeners, welcome to the 2026 to 27 Football League season, which kicks off this Saturday of course with a trip to Queen's Park Rangers, Loftus Road, the Matradi Stadium as it's now known. I call it Loftus Road, don't you? In the first round of the Carabao Cup, the EFL have revived, I think, the great idea of holding the first round of the League Cup as season openers. I think we've had a couple of fixtures already played this week as midweek games, but the main bulk of them are Saturday games. And for me, at least, don't know about you, they make a nice bridge between the rather deadbeat world of friendly football, such as what we had last week with the Royal Antwerp game at the Den, and proper competitive league football, which begins Saturday week at Bristol City. I shall be going to that game, incidentally, listeners, so expect, your usual quantity and quality of reportage for the Bristol game. But I'm also going to be at QPR this coming Saturday. So it's great to see the football start again. Seems to have been a long, close season. Personally, the World Cup was great, but it's a bit like an empty Coca-Cola tin by the end of it all, wasn't it? So anyway, nice to get back to the real thing. So, any road up, listeners, this is I'm going to try and revive our regular historical fixtures from the past features that we do before, the season's Saturday game. Certainly, I can't promise you in front of every single fixture, listeners. I don't believe in making promises that I won't keep. But for the most part, I'm going to try and pick out a fixture from the past as an illustration or a reference to the forthcoming fixture at least on Saturdays, the forthcoming Saturdays through the season. So for this game, this is a Carabao Cup first round tie. I'll try and pick out a Millwall win if I can do, if it's possible. So I've kind of sifted through cup ties between QPR and Millwall in the past. I've found this one. This is an FA Cup third round fixture from 1951, played at Loftus Road on the 6th of January 1951, to be precise. It's in the 50-51 season. That was in front of 25,747 at Loftus Road. Always a tight little ground. Not a ground I particularly like, Loftus Road. Do you like it, dear listeners? It's always rated as one of London's atmospheric stadiums. It always seems a bit like a car park where you might park for a shopping centre to me. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. This game finishes a 4-3 win for the Lions in the third round of the FA Cup. Quite an entertaining game by all accounts. I've got a report here. This is from the Sunday Pictorial. That's the Sunday Mirror, dated the 7th, day after. Sunday papers. Neary is the Millwall Cup hero, says Cliff Bastin, who is reporting for the Sunday Mirror. Millwall's fine gesture in making centre-forward Frank Neary captain against his old club, Queen's Park Rangers, was handsomely acknowledged by the player himself in this cup thriller at Shepherd's Bush. Millwall's splendid 4-3 win was largely due to the shooting power of Neary. His 2 well-taken goals and forceful play had an unsettling effect on the Rangers' defence, making him a cup hero. What a game this was, says Cliff. At times it was terribly ragged, and then suddenly would come flashes of football, with each goal, in turn, undergoing a spell of bombardment. In the first half, Mill did most of the bombarding, and at times it was amazing they did not get more goals. Neary opened the scoring after 27 minutes from a pass by Reeves, and when it looked as if they would take charge, a long kick by Rangers right-back Poppet found their centre-forward, Adenall, who, following a very fine piece of play, forced the ball into net. So that's 1-1 at half-time. In the second half, the real excitement came. In 7 minutes, Neary had scored again, 2-1 Millwall, this time from a pass from Constantine. And with Rangers' defence cracking completely, Johnson and Constantine added 2 further goals, 4-1. Late, though, unexpected happened, says Cliff Bastin, when Parkinson, who had not been having a very good game, went up amongst the forwards, must be a defender for QPR, Parkinson, and scored two grand goals. Rangers fought back to such good purpose they might, with a little more luck, have forced a draw, says Cliff Bastin. The Weekly Dispatch, another Sunday paper of the Times. Incidentally, these papers were wonderful, broadsheet papers. I'll come back to the Sunday Express shortly, but there's the Weekly Dispatch, another broadsheet with the sports news in depth. It's great stuff. We do miss the newsprint world, dear listeners. This was an old-fashioned cup tie, according to the Weekly Dispatch, though. An old-fashioned cup tie with plenty of vigour, enthusiasm, thrills and goals. Millwall were the better side in the first half and at the start of the second, but Rangers staged such a fine fighting recovery towards the end that they are entitled to feel unlucky in not forcing a draw. And then they described the game that we've just run through. So your Millwall team for this excellent third-round win in the FA Cup under the management of Charles Hewitt, huge name in club history. We've covered him in the past. This is with the shows with Neil Fissler and myself. Charlie Hewitt, massive personality, big ego manager. He came back from the 1930s, came back after the war in the 1950s to take charge of the Lions again. And this was a season where we'd finished 5th in the 3rd Division South. But your Millwall Lions 11 for this 4-3 win against QPR. In goal, Malcolm Finlayson. Then we go Alex Jardine, George Fisher, John Short, Jerry Bowler, Frank Reeves, Johnny Johnson, Jimmy Constantine, Frank Neary, Stan Morgan and Les Jones. So as we've said, I mean, it's quite difficult to give you minutes for these goals because you're going by some fairly vaguely written sports reports. I didn't really go much for the factual side of it. And the classified scores at the time didn't list the minutes of the goals, but as best I can make it, 27 minutes for Neary, 1-0 Millwall, 1 each on 33 with Adenall for QPR, 2-1 for Neary in the 53rd. Then after this, the minutes are hard to tell. 3-1 for Johnson, 4-1 with Jimmy Constantine for Millwall, then 2-4 with this defender Parkinson going forward, and finally 3-4 late in the game, I'm presuming, but I can't give you minutes for those. As I say, this is an exciting match. I've picked out 3 names of the goal scorers, to be quite honest. Jimmy Constantine, first of all. This is from Neil Fissler's book, an excellent reference work if you are at all interested in the history of our wonderful club. The Millwall A to Z players. It's on Amazon. I do believe he was working on an updated version. Not sure if that's for sale or if you can get it on Amazon, but do get whatever version you can. It's a fine reference work. I'll find it invaluable when I'm doing these little shows. So hats off to Neil there. So Jimmy Constantine, James Joseph Constantine, great picture of Jimmy in the book, black and white. He's wearing kind of like a rugby shirt. I think Toffs did a version of it. I used to have it. I don't know what happened to it. I must have lost it in one of the various apocalypses of my life. Must have lost it. It had the red MFC lion on the breast. It was a royal blue rugby shirt almost, really. Jimmy played for us between 1948 and 1952, played 153 games, scoring 83 goals for us in that time. Born in Ashton-under-Lyne in 1920, he passed away in Pembury in Kent in 1998. His career took in the Grenadier Guards. It was a wonderful career. Ashton National was a guest player. This must have been wartime football. Played for Rochdale 1945, Manchester City, April 1945. War still on at that point, but football was starting to return. Bury signed for 4,000 in August 1947. Then player exchange to Millwall 1948 before leaving for Tunbridge in 1955-62. So the little pen picture that Neil's got here, Connie, that was his nickname, Connie, scored hat-tricks for Manchester City and Bury in successive seasons before he was signed by the wonderfully named Jack Cock in exchange for Bob Kelly in 1948 after relegation to the 3rd Division South. Jimmy was a thorough gentleman, but as hard as nails on the pitch. That's a Millwall description for you. A gentleman off the pitch, but hard as nails on the pitch. And he was leading scorer in 3 successive seasons, holding the club goal-scoring record until Patrick Posse beat it in the early 70s. He was a Kent Challenge Cup winner. He finished his career with Southern League Tunbridge and settled in the town where he worked as a chlorinator tester at Wallace and Tiern's. Must have been a chlorinator of swimming pools or something, or water safety, I don't know, until his retirement. He was a regular at both the old and new dens right up until his death. And this particular season, We're talking about 1950-51. He was our top scorer with 27 goals. That's quite a goal haul for Jimmy Constantine. What characters the players of these times were? They'd lived through the Second World War. They were working men, and as Neil's got there, he would still come back to the old den and the new den up until he passed away in 98. Jimmy Constantine, not a name I don't think that we've mentioned many times on these kinds of shows, and as I always say, it's wonderful to be able to mention some of the leading players, but also some of the, the lesser lights, shall we call them, without being disrespectful to them. So, Jimmy Constantine, though, big name, club record goal scorer until Posse's arrival in the early 70s on that front. 27 goals this season. Next up, Johnny Johnson, 334 games for us and 51 goals between 1946 and 57. Quite a servant for the club then. Born in Hazel Grove, I don't know where that is. I'm going to guess that's a northern town. Died in Sellinger, I don't know where that is. He came from Stockport County, so I'm guessing the Manchester area. I don't know Hazel Grove at all. Stockport County, played for Millwall in 1945, Tunbridge 1955, Margate 57, Canterbury City 1957, and then Dover to finish. He was a wartime guest for the club. Wartime football used to have because the players were in the army or the services, Navy or the Air Force, they would be shuffled around the country as operational needs dictated. So often you could find yourself a Millwall player, but billeted in I don't know, Aberdeen or somewhere. So many players took the chance to get a game and would play for their local club wherever they were based in the army. So you get a lot of guest players. You could find yourself playing for Aberdeen, even though you're a Millwall player or a Charlton player or whatever. Johnny was a wartime guest for the club, coming in from Stockport. He was in London as a wireless operator for the RAF. He would then serve in the Middle East. He was fast and tricky with excellent distribution, says Neil here. He was signed permanently, and at the end of his first season, he was joint leading scorer of Jimmy Jinks with 10 goals. He overcame being advised to retire from the game, aged 25, because of an injury that affected his kidneys. Despite leaving for Tunbridge after falling out with Charlie Hewitt, it was easy to fall out with Charlie Hewitt, I understand. Johnny returned 2 months as a part-time professional. He later worked as a sales rep, ran a couple of pubs before becoming a postman until his retirement. He passed away in 2003. Johnny Johnson, fine servant for the club there. The final name I've picked out is the other goal scorer, and this is one of the great iconic photos, which I'll have to stick on the the internet meme that put out with the show. Frank Neary, Harold Francis Neary, to give him his full title. Famous picture of him in the dressing room at Coldblow with a fag sticking out of his mouth. Our American listeners need to know that fag in English is a metaphor for a cigarette, not anything else you might be imagining over there stateside. We do have a lot of American listeners. I think they're fairly well versed in the local argot of Millwall. But anyway, he's got a cigarette stick in his mouth. Great picture. And he's also wearing, this must have been pre-war, I think the Lions wore a kind of a silk-style shirt. It had a sheen. No, it had been floodlight. It must have been post-war, floodlight football. I think the Charlie Hewitt had the idea of having like a silky type finish on the shirts to show up better under the floodlights. He was one of these managers that was trying to look ahead, forward thinking, if you want, in many respects. And there's Frank with his sheen, silk-ish Millwall blue football shirt on, but with a cigarette sticking in his mouth. Played for us 1950-54, so no, they weren't pre-war at all. I'm talking tosh there. 142 games for us, 59 goals, goal-scoring forward. Born in Aldershot in 1921. He passed away in North Cheam in 2003. His career took in Ken Sports, Finchley, QPR, West Ham, Leyton Orient, QPR again, Millwall in 1949 for £6,000. Then Sittingbourne, Gravesend and Northfleet, Dartford, Hastings, Lewis and Windsor and Eton. The pen picture that Neil's written here, Frank roamed around London in the immediate post-war years with impressive results. He had been West Ham's leading scorer in 1947 and then Leyton Orient's in 48 and 49 when he reunited with Charlie Hewitt in New Cross for £6,000. A debut goal against Exeter started to repay the debt as he formed a formidable partnership with Jimmy Constantine. So Neary and Constantine, as we've seen in this game, a formidable duo up front. He was a crowd favourite. He topped the line scoring charts in 1952 before going into non-league coaching and management whilst working in the print for the Sunday Times until his retirement. His son Dennis also was a centre forward, played non-league football. 23 goals, 1950-51 for Frank Neary, and what a photo. It's one of the great photos of football history. There we are, dear listeners. So as I said, we would finish fifth in the Third Division South in this particular season. Champions for the campaign were Nottingham Forest. Only the champions were promoted back in these tough times. Post-war austerity, although the Second World War finished with victory, times got tougher still in the post-war rebuilding period. There wasn't much money around. And there wasn't an awful lot of joy to be had in football if you only the champions got promoted to the second division. But that was Nottingham Forest this season, with Watford and Crystal Palace applying for re-election at the bottom of the Third Division South. Scorers, as we said, top scorer Jimmy Constantine, 28 goals, not 27. I think I said 27. 28 goals, Jimmy Constantine. Frank Neary, 23 goals, followed by Stan Morgan with 13 that particular season. We would exit the FA Cup versus Fulham. There's a great report from the Evening News here on the 10th of January following our win over QPR. Millwall Cup prices. Mill FC announced they have agreed with Fulham the following prices to be charged for their fourth round FA Cup tie at New Cross on January the 27th. Admission to the ground, listeners, adults, 2 shillings. That's 10 pence nowadays. Boys under 14 with 1 shilling, 5p. Covered enclosure and covered stand tickets, 4 shillings. So that would be 20p. Obviously, values change over time, don't they? No tickets will be issued. Admission will be through the turnstiles on the day of the match. The gates open at noon and there's room for 55,000 people. Coldblow Lane. 55,000. They actually got 42,000 in there for the 1-0 loss at home to Fulham. That would be Mill's exit from the FA Cup. There we go. So that was the QPR 3, Millwall 4. We'd have a quick look at the front page news of the Sunday Express whilst we're on the subject, dear listeners. Hope you don't mind. Sunday Express, was that dated the 7th of January 1951. This would have been the Clement Attlee Labour government still. I believe they'd been re-elected with a reduced majority in 1950. And Sunday Express, a famous Conservative supporting newspaper, so they would have been, in opposition to the government. Their bold headline is the Cabinet's new idea to stop, quote, high living. You weren't allowed to enjoy yourself, is their thrust. No capital levy, but a capital freeze. Shares can't be sold without a permit. Capital levies, so it's basically trying to, hit your money. I'll leave you to say whatever you want to those kinds of stories. There's a picture of Princess Margaret, implying that she eats sausage and mash. She's gone to meet some working class people and had sausage and mash for breakfast, but I doubt very much she did. She was known for spending half the morning with a gin and tonic in bed and smoking more fags, American listeners. War in Korea, MacArthur, the US Air Force responded to criticism of their air bombing campaign in Korea. And what else we got here? A police chief holds onto a runaway horse. The chief constable of Hastings, Lieutenant Colonel Cargill, was driving into the city over Southwark Bridge yesterday when he saw a horse drawing a delivery dray galloping towards him. He stopped his car, leapt out and stopped the horse by hanging on the reins. And there we go. Big story there. Snow has caused a breakdown on the 6,000-foot funicular railway leading up to Schmelz, Carinthia, Austria, and the stranded 200 British soldiers at the top. What are they doing there? They're learning to ski at army school. These are the odd things that happen, according to the Sunday Express, a big broadsheet newspaper with a famous Crusader logo, founded by Lord Beaverbrook, who was the wartime, known as Max Aitken originally, and he was Winston Churchill's Minister of Aircraft Production and was a kind of like an entrepreneur, I suppose you'd call him entrepreneur in modern terminology. And his great media empire was built on the Sunday Express. Whatever you think of all of these stories, it was a great and mighty newspaper, and it's just sad to see the decline of Fleet Street generally when you look at these old broadsheet newspapers. But there we are. I'm waxing all nostalgic for you, dear listeners. There it is. That's the Sunday Express, January 1951. Millwall going through the FA Cup third round at QPR. Let's hope for a similar result on Saturday. I shall be there, dear listeners. Do send me your voice note reports afterwards. I'd love to get your voice notes. We'll be back fully in the swing of the usual reportage at Bristol City the following week, Saturday week, but I will be back at the weekend post QPR with any content I can muster from that game. So until then, from me, Nick Hart, thank you for listening. Do appreciate it. It's Arrivederci Millwall. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Achtung Millwall. All profits from our show benefit the fabulous Lions Food Hubs, helping families in the SE16 area. Until the next show then, it's Arrivederci Millwall. Bye for now.
Who do you want to watch?